Hello, everybody.
Hello.
This is Adela from Romania, and I am Hugh from Canada, and we are going to share with you today some insights and experience around Chiron.
Hello, Hugh.
Hey, that was beautiful. So
Thank
the reason that
this
we
is
began with a
this
little
is
bit of
my
drumming,
this is my drum, my shamanic drum, named Elias, and he is made out of horse skin, and you will find out why in few minutes.
right? So we're just going to share a little bit today about the centaur Chiron, and this was a body that was discovered in our solar system in the 1970s, very recently, relatively. And it's like an asteroid or a comet. It has an elliptical orbit and travels beyond the orbits of both Saturn and Uranus. Very interesting symbolically. So people that have studied Chiron and its meaning, because everything has a meaning, a symbol, have discovered various archetypes associated with Chiron, who was the king of the centaurs, half man, half horse, and he was the teacher of the sons of Zeus in Greek mythology. He was a teacher, an astrologer, a healer, a herbalist, a shaman, and lived with his wife, Chariklo, in a cave halfway up a mountain. So I'm just going to ask you, Adela, because you have been very attracted to uh, the meaning of Chiron in your own chart and in your own life, a few questions. Is that okay?
Yes, of course. Thank you. I'll be
Great,
glad to answer.
great. So how did you meet Chiron, so to speak, or how did you become interested or attracted to the study of Chiron in your own life?
uh, Well, I've been interested in astrology for quite some time, but I didn't meet Chiron through astrology first, even if some friends of mine that are astrology calculated the position of Chiron for me, but I had to meet Chiron through other circumstances. And I think I was very connected with the symbolism of the horse
Yeah.
and the power that the horse has, and this duality of the centaur between human and animal. This was something that I really felt attracted to. So about 3 years ago, this very beautiful shamanic drum came into my life, and I got even more connected to the spirit of horses and the healing force they have.
Mm-hmm.
And moment by moment, Chiron started to appear in my life as a very strong archetype that balances the instinctual and spiritual side.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a very nice meeting, and I discovered Chiron step by step, even in my chart. How was your discovery of Chiron?
Well, um, I was, as a young man, I was fascinated by the beautiful, exquisite, and sophisticated language of symbols that is astrology, and also was always attracted to astronomy and the far reaches of the solar system of the galaxy, and how what's happening in the heavens is a reflection of what's happening on the earth and within myself and individuals. So I guess in the early 90s or the mid 90s, there was a group, and we had a Yahoo group on the internet, and we were studying Chiron and other centaurs. Chiron was the first one to be discovered, I think 1979 perhaps. And then they started to discover more. Pholus, Nessus, Hyleno. There's a whole family of centaurs, but Chiron is the big one and the first one to be discovered. So we had a study group, and every day we would be creating and becoming mindful of what messages this discovery, astronomical discovery, might have for humanity. And ever since, I've been fascinated by that concept of the shaman. I've spent time with indigenous peoples and practiced meditation and various types of, I guess, mental and psychospiritual practices, development. So Chiron seems to be a wonderful companion to that journey of going down into the shadow and identifying what the resistances we have to healing, and then being able to work through it. So
yes, beautiful meeting you had with Chiron.
Yeah.
And you met him when he was discovered. That's nice.
well, not exactly. A little bit later, but it was a while ago, mid 90s. You were probably hardly born. I don't know.
I was still in the universe somewhere.
There you go. Floating around. You were a star. So great. So what image and symbols, you mentioned already the horse, of course, which is, the centaurs are half human and half horse. You mentioned that significance. Is there any other symbols that you associate with Chiron or archetypes?
Yeah, I associate it a lot with the wind horse, with the Lungta horse. And I associated with this messenger between worlds. It says that the Lungta wind horse was the one carrying the prayers from the earth to the heavens. And I believe this is the main image I associated with.
Yes.
The very deep and powerful messenger that is both connected to the real world, the earth and the real world, and also with the spiritual. What is the symbol you associated with?
Yeah, well, that very much, because the physical aspect, like the scientific astronomical feature of Chiron, is that it has an elliptical orbit. Most of the planets, like Venus and Mars and the Earth, have round orbits around the sun. Only Pluto, the farthest one out, has a slightly elliptical orbit, and Mercury, the most inner planet, has a slightly elliptical, meaning egg-shaped. But Chiron has a very elliptical orbit, and it actually crosses over the boundary of Saturn, which is the last of the inner solar system, the ones that we can see with traditionally with the telescope, and the outer planets, which represent perhaps the unconscious and the spiritual realm, Uranus and Neptune and Pluto. So as you're saying, it's like a messenger between the conscious and the unconscious, between the inner world and the outer world, between the animal and the human, and therefore perhaps a hint that between the human and the spiritual, between the left brain and the right brain. And that idea of the wind horse, which you introduced me to, Lung Ta in Chinese, perhaps, or Tibetan, of a horse, a spirit horse. It's like the human spirit that can travel, is very much associated with shamanism and the playing of the drum, for example, or chanting. It provides a vehicle through
Mm-hmm.
which that horse can fly between the worlds. So there's
Yeah.
that, the messenger, and then the teacher, because Chiron was the teacher of the gods, the children of the gods. And so how do we find the teacher in our own life? What do we have that we need to teach, and what do we have that we need to learn from our
Mm-hmm.
inner guru or
Yeah.
outer teachers? And then the third one, of course, perhaps the most famous, is the wounded healer. And the
Yeah.
key, the symbol for Chiron actually in astrology is a key. And
And very nice one, a very nice key.
yeah,
A very
beautiful.
pretty one.
Yeah, a key that can open the door to our healing. And
Mm-hmm.
so Chiron was wounded. I won't go into the whole story now, but
Mm-hmm.
there was a wedding, and Chiron received a wound that was going to kill him. It was a poison arrow. But Zeus, God, so to speak, allowed him to live if he promised to teach his children, because Chiron was very wise.
Mm-hmm.
And so Chiron said, okay. So he had this wound until in his leg for the rest of his life. It caused him a great deal of pain. So it's like the wound that no matter how hard we try to heal it, it's always there. But at the same time, it can be the key to
Yeah.
open the door to our wholeness and integration.
And I also see the key as a symbol for journeying, for like an inner pilgrimage, if you can say that.
Yes,
Uh, I think it's a journey. So you go together with your Chiron on a journey that is like a never-ending journey,
yes,
and it's about healing and rediscovering yourself and healing again. And yes, it's
yes.
a nice journey.
Exactly. Well, I'm just thinking, though in English at least, the word car, vehicle, car, Chiron, they sound very similar. And we get into our car, which has horsepower, we say, in the engine, and we need the key to start that engine, and then we go on our journey. So
Yes,
our
I
modern horse.
totally. Yeah, I
Yeah.
totally agree. Yes.
So another question we might look at. I love
Mhm.
to hear your responses, Adela. We haven't known each other for very long, but you have a wonderful intuition. You're very visual, and you're able to jump from one image or idea to another with great fluidity. So that's a wonderful gift.
That's my Uranus dominant.
Uranus dominant. That's true. Yes.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
Yes.
So another question would be, I'm just looking at the list here that we made. So speaking of intuition, intuitive healing, what is the manner in which we can connect with our Chiron to activate the healing process within us that we long for?
Oh. um,
That's a big question.
I believe it also depends on how we are structured mainly, because some of us, as I'm quite a mental person and I like information. So for some of us, it might be connecting to your natal chart and seeing Chiron there, and starting from information, and the healing comes like that. From information, we dive deeper. Or there are very intuitive people, or very uh, people that have more feeling of their own body or of their inner responses, and it can be um, connecting to your emotions or connecting to images that you have.
Yes.
In my case, it came from looking at my chart.
Hmm.
uh, I'm constantly uh, reinventing the way I see my chart, also not only of my clients. And I discovered my Chiron is in Cancer,
Hmm.
and because I have some aspects, some maybe difficult aspects that planets make with the moon, for me it's a lot about dealing with my emotions and expressing emotions. So that's the way it plays for me, and I think
Hmm.
it's very nice to see where your Chiron is in the chart and the connection it makes to inner and outer planets, because it can make all the process be more clear and more simple. So this is how it played in my case.
Yes.
And the emotional part is very important, and it helped me realize that opening up and talking about my emotion and express his emotion heals not only me, but heals also people around me. So this is how Chiron starts and acts like a teacher. You heal yourself, and while healing yourself, you can heal the others too.
Beautiful. I'm just looking at your chart. May I share a little bit?
Yes.
Okay.
We are laser reading our charts.
Well, there's a very beautiful aspect which is consists of a rectangle, which sometimes I love the visual aspect of a chart, the geometry, the sacred geometry that we find, triangles and rectangles and yods, quintiles. But this is what they call a mystic triangle, which is 4 points. One is Chiron, as you said, in Cancer, and it has a very close, exact aspect to the North Node, a trine with a sextile to the South Node, and Uranus, which you already mentioned is your dominant planet. And then, of course, with the Sun also, there's another sextile, a very close aspect to your Sun. So your Chiron is very powerfully situated in relationship to you could say your basic identity and your motivation or your impetus towards your purpose, which is the North Node, and the South Node as well, of course, which is sort of where you're coming from, the accumulation of karma, easy and difficult. And then Uranus, which is one of the planets that Chiron touches and even goes over its orbit.
And I always felt this, it's the messenger archetype of Chiron. In my case, it plays a big role because it touches Uranus, that is a transpersonal planet. So I always felt this messaging between my story and the story of everybody. Where is your Chiron? What can you tell us about it?
Well, my Chiron is, coincidentally, we have our 2 Chirons, if we put our charts together, an exact trine, right down
and
to the...
both in water signs.
Yes, not only 1 degree, but 1% of 1 degree, only 2 seconds from an exact trine. So mine is in Scorpio, and in the 7th house, which is the house of relationship. And there's also an exact square with the Sun. So, and Mars is connected there with a semi-square too. So, yeah, I was thinking how Chiron can sort of have allies depending on what function it may be concerned with. We may be concerned in our own journey, depending on life circumstances. And the messenger archetype could connect Chiron with Mercury, because Mercury was the messenger of the gods. And so very much that part of Chiron is aligned with the nature of Mercury. And Mercury also being the closest planet to the Sun, and it also is with Pluto, the only planets that have a little bit of an elliptical orbit. Interesting. And so the other one is Pluto, which is the farthest from the Sun, was actually demoted to the category of planetoid, but those who love Pluto still consider it a full-fledged planet.
I do love it, yes.
Yes. Well, in evolutionary astrology, of course, Pluto is big news, and the opposite point of Pluto and the nodes of the moon. So Pluto represents the underworld and the shadow going deep down, as in Scorpio, for example, and bringing up
mine.
information. Yes, your Pluto is in Scorpio, exactly.
That's
yeah.
my generation.
Yeah, the whole generation. So that shamanic idea of going down into the shadow and being courageous enough to deal with our resistances and blocks that we have to healing. And it sometimes is uncomfortable, painful even a little bit. But if we have the courage and faith that it's going to be okay, then Pluto can be a very powerful ally in that shamanic journey to the underground.
What I resonated with is the connection between Pluto, Chiron, and the centaurs, and
Yes.
the fact that they go very deep into the infernal realm.
Yes,
Also, the cave associated with the unknown, and
that's true. Yeah.
so the infernal is not necessarily bad. It's just
No.
a place where you go. You don't know what you discover there, but
Yes,
many times come with a lot of wisdom. So
exactly. Well,
yeah.
we both this is how we met actually, was through the studying the gene keys, a brilliant work by Richard Rudd, which brings together the zodiac, astrology, and overlaid with the I Ching in a circular manner, and also the genes and the codons that we have in our genetic code. Fascinating. And so that might be interesting to just touch upon that. In your chart, which gene key does your Chiron lie? And
And
what does that mean?
as the symbol of Chiron is the key.
That's great.
What's the key to the profile? Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Mine is the 15 gene key, number 15, on line 5. Line 5 is about impact, power and impact, and the 15 gene key is about flowering, about
Oh.
blossoming of love and flowering, and it's very related to the love of humanity. It's a gate of love, and yes, it's one of the ways in which my deep healing process started, connecting my emotional work with the fact that healing my emotions bring more flowering and more love and more beauty into the world. And it's an ongoing process. I keep doing this process, and it's very, very nice for me. And your gene key is which one? Activating your Chiron.
Yeah. Well, just before I say that, I'd just like to comment that maybe in that idea that being a messenger, that Chiron can align itself with different planets, Pluto, Mercury, and maybe in your case, first of all, being in Cancer, which is a sign of, a sensitivity and feeling, ruled by the moon, emotions. Maybe Venus also, the moon and Venus could be traveling with Chiron in your case. And that
We need
idea
to be
of,
prepared for all these planets.
yeah, all of them. Yeah.
Chiron.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Chiron can be friends with everybody.
Yes.
Even though he lived up in a cave, was a bit of a hermit, but when he comes out,
But we are two for profile, both of us, so we know how being a hermit.
yes.
Yes.
So just looking at my own hologenetic profile, I have the Chiron in the 28th gene key, which happens to be coincidentally where my sphere of purpose.
So your subconscious
Yeah.
earth.
Yeah. And with the fourth line, which is breath, the shadow of that gene key is purposelessness. And I must say that this is what I suffer so much from, is my inability to focus. I have so many great ideas, a dime a dozen, and very creative process. But it's so hard for me to focus my mind and my attention on one thing, so that I have this sense of purposelessness, and a lot of frustration, anger at myself, and grief, a deep grief, that I'm not able to grasp or get a hold of my little piece of destiny or whatever. So it's a continual process of struggling with that, and I have not broken through yet. But so the gift is totality and immortality, So there's something to look forward to once I move through that shadow. But this also says embracing the dark side as one of the key phrases of the 28th gene key. So very much, Chiron going down. It's in Scorpio, ruled by Pluto, going down into the, what did you call it, the underworld.
Very, very deep.
The darkness. Yeah, I'm a psychotherapist as well, or a counselor by profession. So I've always been interested in that struggle with our dark side and how we can turn it into light. Embrace the dark side and learn from it, and then break through to the other side. So that idea of the wind horse, just jumping on the horse and allowing Chiron to take us on the journey.
Yes. Yes, very beautiful.
Yeah.
Yes, so very nice.
That was beautiful. Thank you so much. And today, Adela and I just wanted to provide a few ideas and keywords and images and thoughts for you regarding Chiron. And this will be on YouTube, I imagine, and we can also put in a couple of links, perhaps to our websites, but more importantly for your study, if you're interested, to a couple of books that you might find really interesting by Melanie Reinhardt, for example, who also talks about Chariklo, the wife of Chiron, who interestingly enough had a round orbit of all the centaurs. Hers is she's the biggest one, and she's round like the planets. And she was basically, she and Chiron were co-facilitators of the work. She was very powerful and important in.
And I like the way you said it when we last talked, a power couple.
Yeah, they were a power couple, very much.
They were the power couple in the cave.
Yes. And she raised children. They had children together, and they were amazing. They went on in Greek mythology to become very powerful and influential characters themselves. But they raised these children successfully, while at the same time teaching many people, having people living in their house, mentoring them. Yeah. So we'll put a link to Melanie Reinhardt's video on Chariklo. And especially now with the Saturn-Pluto conjunction in Capricorn, which has been going on almost all of 2019 and most of this year, 2020 as well. And with the COVID-19, we haven't even mentioned that, but this is certainly one of the...
for a period.
Yeah, but we're going, the foundations of our structures are being shaken. And that's political, economic, social, and many people through this, the grief, the fear, are breaking through to the other side and looking for a spiritual kind of manifestation in our social relationships.
And the deeper healing of themselves and of the planet, not
right.
only of their own self.
Exactly, yes. Serving, how can we be more interested in others' welfare, including our beautiful Mother Earth, than ourselves?
Yes.
Yeah, maybe Chiron can help us in that department as well.
Yes,
Great.
so I'm very glad we could share, and hope we can guide other people to this meeting with Chiron. It would be an honor and a pleasure to make this trailblazing meeting between people that feel the internal need to heal and to heal others, and to meet with their own Chiron in the chart. And if so, both of us are here.
Right. Thank you so much, Adela, for collaborating and offering your wisdom and insights.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thanks, everybody. See you next time.